A group of 150 infectious disease experts from Minnesota and Wisconsin is spearheading an effort to closely watch developments with a COVID-19 vaccine. As we know, there is a strong push to get a vaccine out to the public as soon as possible, but many are warning doing so quickly could be more disastrous than helpful. Betsy Singer is an infectious disease nurse practitioner at Children's Minnesota. And let's talk about this group and how you all came together. There's about 150 with this organization in particular, Patsy?
So this group are infectious disease clinicians who meet once a week by phone with the Minnesota Department of Health. We're from Minnesota, some from Wisconsin. We're infectious disease doctors, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and we've been doing the frontline COVID care and planning from the very beginning.
Well, we are focusing mostly today in this conversation about your group and a vaccine. I know that there are at least 9 companies that are in development of a vaccine. Some are in clinical trials. The point of putting out a letter today, does it come off the heels of some of the political talk that we've been talking about, the debate talk? Is it about a vaccine coming out too early?
So this group has been talking about COVID vaccines for a long, long time, and we decided to share our thoughts that we really support vaccine science and the scientists who we believe are following the important safety steps. And that's our main message. We appreciate the transparency, the open communication. We want the regulatory steps at the FDA and CDC to be followed as usual, and making sure that we are confident in the safe and effective vaccine when it does roll out.
Betsy, is there a concern that there might not be what you're talking about, that we wouldn't have the transparency, that it wouldn't be as closely monitored, it's just going to be put out too early?
We really wanted to make sure that there was no pressure to rush a vaccine, to skip any steps, and we don't think that's happening. We think that the right measures are happening. But when you think about vaccine development, the shortest time for a vaccine was the mumps vaccine, which took 4 years. And so this is lightning speed. And we are sure that the steps are not being taken to shortcut any of the safety or effectiveness. And that's what we're watching. Our team is especially expert in this, and we would know if there were shortcuts that were taken. And we don't anticipate that at this point.
I have done a couple of interviews about Operation Warp Speed, and we heard the president even mention it last night during the debate. Operation Warp Speed is, of course, a group of our medical experts on the national level who are working on making sure that the vaccine that does come out, and if it is within the next 6 months, say, is going to be effective and is going to be safe. Warp Speed for your group, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, we know that this pandemic is so difficult on all of us, and we want it behind us as soon as possible. But we know that the way to get this behind us is through vaccination. And our development of vaccines, what's unusual here is that rather than sort of like a hurdles in a hurdle running race, you've got these swim lanes, multiple swim lanes of work that's going on. So you've got development, and you've got research, and you've got regulatory, and you've got financing, and you've got distribution all happening at the same time. That's where we're cutting our time and really trying to get a good, safe vaccine out to people as soon as possible.
Before the break, we were talking about a vaccine for COVID-19. My interview from earlier this afternoon was with Betsy Singer, a nurse practitioner at Children's Minnesota. She's part of a group of 150 infectious disease experts looking at a vaccine. We're also continuing that conversation now and moving into testing. Who in your group has any ties to the political realm of things? Because I know the argument is, let's make sure that we're relying on science and not doing things too quickly. So are there any folks within your organization that are working with some of these politicians who are really pushing this and saying, you know what, slow down a little bit?
I'm the representative on the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. It's the CDC group that will be one of the last stops for a vaccine. So I probably have that greatest connection. We also have some public health individuals who are on there. And all of us are really looking towards that safe, effective vaccine.
Do we know what's in it? And for the most part, I think we do.
Yeah, so there's a variety of vaccines that are available. This is a very transparent process, so there's lots of details on what's in each vaccine, where the manufacturers are in their journey here, and that will all be presented this week.
When the vaccine does roll out, we have seen CDC guidelines as to the priorities of groups and who will be getting the first vaccines once these prioritized groups have gotten a vaccine, when the general public then gets it.
Right, that's exactly right. That even with the great collaboration, that it will take time to manufacture enough vaccines for the general public, in which case you need to decide who goes first. You want to make sure that you're taking care of the people, vaccinating those who care for sick people, so they're available to do that care. And then also the high-risk groups, and those we know are the elderly and those with high-risk conditions. So this phased approach will be really important, and we'll be following that closely.
Betsy, I want to ask this, going a little bit away from the vaccine, but with testing, the antigen testing, people who I know say, I was sick back in March before COVID really became something real explosive to where we are now, and they want to know if they can get tested for the antibodies. And I'm curious about that as well. And so I'm hoping that you can tell me if the general public is being able to do that, or do I have to have had symptoms, or I don't know how that works.
Right. Antibody testing is still not a general recommendation for the general public. I think we all feel like last winter we had an unusual cold that it must have been COVID. And the reason is that the antibody testing has a ways to go before it is clear and perfected. Like, what does it mean? How long do antibodies last? If you have a negative test, does that mean you didn't have COVID? Or does it mean you had it and your antibodies are gone? We're using antibody tests primarily for children who have had a recent COVID positive infection and now are presenting with the symptoms of MISC, that inflammatory syndrome that children get up to a few months after having COVID. So that is an appropriate place to use an antibody test.
This is great information, because every time I ask one question in 2 weeks, that question then has changed because things have been changing with COVID-19. So I really appreciate this, Patsy, and hopefully I can talk to you in a couple of weeks and kind of see where we're at.
Happy to do so. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, thank you.